Thanks so much. Thanks. 5 years of work in there. It's actually a 517-page book. I hope it stays that interesting. No, this is just something I pulled
I'm
out.
looking forward to reading it
Yes.
and all the footnotes that you might have made up to go along.
I actually have a lot of footnotes in it, but they're not made up.
Even better.
Peter, will you come to the new Adobe and sign copies for us?
Yeah, I'd be a delight.
Yay.
Be a delight. I don't know who's going to publish it yet. I wrote it on spec because I didn't want a deadline, and it actually took me a long time because I started 2 totally different books in the 5 years, and it evolved into this. Nobody seemed to give a shit about what I thought should be done in the United States of America if everyone would just behave like I told them to.
Can I ask you how much you go into in this particular book, the spiritual journey that you described in
The whole last, what happens is, coming out west, the Diggers, I meet Gary Snyder, and that begins my introduction to Zen practice. And then Zen becomes one of the threads that weaves up and down. And then the final chapter is called The Rain Man's Third Cure. And it was like the kind of seminal Zen event that resolved all my doubts. And so that's sort of like where all this has led. So I'd say it's in half the book, that spiritual journey and my failures to live up to it, and my false turns and dead ends, and it's very much a part of it.
Sounds great.
Hope so. Yeah.
So this is separate from Sleeping Where I Fall, and you wrote all this yourself?
Yeah. Every word myself, and it's a completely other book. There are a couple of stories that were published in Sleeping Where I Fall,
Right.
but only 2, only the ones that I read in the story about my dad. And because that's actually what I do. I came to San Francisco to get my master's in creative writing in 1963. And I always considered myself a writer who makes his living as an actor. But I think I'm a much better writer than I am an actor.
Oh, darling, magnificent storyteller.
Well, thanks. I'm glad you like
So
it.
how did you actually get out of the border there?
Oh, so my dad was a cattle rancher, and he had a partner in Texas who was married to a very, very wealthy Mexican woman. She owned 1 million acres of land in Mexico. And she got us transferred to Brownsville, Texas, from Matamoros to Brownsville, Texas. And then my dad's partner was one of the 100 families that controls Texas. But this was 1958. And the same year, they just sentenced Candy Barr to 15 years in prison for having a joint in her bra. And they'd caught me with 8 kilos. But I was 17, and it saved me because I was a judge delinquent. And so my record was expunged when I was 21. But I'll tell you one story that's funny. So when I was 21, so as I was preparing to go to the border, I put on a shirt and I put on a tie because I was innocent. I was on a life. Say what?
Did you have underwear?
Yeah, I had underwear on. I had a shirt and tie on, and I just sailed to the border. When I was 21, I got my file back. I got my mug shots and I got everything back. And I was wearing a shirt, but it was a Greek fisherman's shirt. And my tie was knotted around my neck. There was no collar. It was just bobbing on my Adam's apple. And one eye was about twice as big as the other, and it looked like I'd stuck my finger in a light socket for 20 minutes. And I wondered why my disguise didn't work.
Should have saved that picture.
Yeah, maybe so.
You know, I've been trying to find that picture. I would love to put it in the book.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
The path of wisdom. How do young people travel that path while also needing to balance out the need for power to make a living? Because it seems like the path of wisdom isn't necessarily aligned with making a living.
Well, that's not exactly true. So here's a working definition of wisdom, just to give us something to talk about. I can tell you two things about the world that are indisputably true. I'm sure you'll agree with them. If I tell you that every grain of sand is different, that every blade of grass is different, and that every human being is different, I'm sure you won't have a quarrel with that. If I also tell you that the entire universe is one indivisible, interdependent organism, I'm sure you won't have a problem with that. You can't live without sunshine. You're not independent of water, of microbes in the soil. If the Earth's orbit was not where it is, water would either boil or freeze. So both things are indisputably true. And the problem is that language can't express both of them simultaneously. And we tend to think in words, and we tend to think in language. So everything we say is always half wrong. If I'm talking from the relative point of view, every blade of grass is different, I'm not remembering, and everything is interdependent. And if I'm saying we're all one, I'm forgetting. So what wisdom traditions do, all of them, is they afford the practitioner some experience of absolute unity so that they never forget whichever half of the equation they're in. So if I'm talking from the relative, I don't forget the absolute. If I'm talking from the absolute, I don't forget the relative. So there's nothing there that's inimical to making a living. In fact, you see the world very clearly and without delusions, because rather than being hidden and operating like a kind of internal mental pressure, you're remembering all of it. So wisdom itself is power. Wisdom gives you power over indulgence, gives you power over anger, gives you power over fear, it gives you power over delusion. So what better way to make a living and to be effective at something than to undertake disciplines and practices that give you mastery? See what I mean?
That's a good answer.
I'm an old guy now. I couldn't have answered it when I was 20.